And this is where the conversation turns inward, because the power we are exploring was never meant to be observed from a distance. I've seen again and again that the moment we stop treating consciousness as an abstract idea and begin experiencing it as a living force, something profound shifts inside us. We realize that belief is not passive. Belief is acted as a biological instruction, a signal that tells ourselves how to respond to the world around us. When we hold a belief long enough, the body does not argue with it. The nervous system adapts, the chemistry of the blood changes, gene expression follows suit. This is not poetry, it is physiology. I've studied research showing that perception alone can trigger immune responses, hormonal cascades, even measurable changes in heart rhythm. The body listens closely to the story we tell ourselves about who we are. Ancient traditions understood this intuitively. They spoke of the heart as an intelligence, not merely a pump. Modern instruments now confirm that the heart generates a powerful electromagnetic field, one that communicates continuously with the brain. When emotion and belief align, that signal becomes coherent. In that coherence, the body operates with efficiency and resilience. Chaos dissolves into order. This is what I mean by human divinity. It is not about superiority or separation. It is about alignment. When thought, emotion, and intention move in the same direction, we access a state of inner authority. We are no longer reacting to life, we are participating in it consciously. The ancients encoded this wisdom in symbols and stories, while modern science decodes it through data and measurement. I often remind people that emotions are not weaknesses to be managed or suppressed. They are the language through which belief enters the body. Fear tightens the system, narrowing perception and shutting down creativity. Gratitude, compassion, and appreciation do the opposite. They expand awareness, synchronize internal rhythms, and open pathways for healing and insight. So what fascinates me is how quickly the body responds when we change the emotional tone of our inner world. Within minutes of sustained positive emotion, stress hormones drop, immune markers improve, and brainwave patterns shift. This tells us that transformation does not require years of struggle. It requires coherence, practiced consistently. Belief without emotion is powerless. Emotion without belief is chaotic. Together they form a living code that instructs our biology moment by moment. This is why rituals, prayer, and focused intention have persisted across culture. They create a container where belief and emotion converge, allowing the body to respond as if the desired outcome is already real. We are conditioned to think of ourselves as limited by genetics, history, or circumstance. Yet epigenetic science reveals that genes are responsive, not deterministic. Environment matters, and the most intimate environment we inhabit is our internal state. The thoughts we think repeatedly become chemical signals. Those signals influence which genes are activated or silenced. This understanding carries responsibility. If we are participating in the shaping of our biology, then awareness becomes an ethical act. Choosing how we respond to adversity is no longer just a psychological preference, it is a biological decision. We are teaching ourselves what kind of world they live in. The freedom. I've noticed that people often ask for techniques, methods, or shortcuts. But the deeper work begins with remembering that we are not broken. Remembering that the intelligence guiding our heartbeat is the same intelligence organizing galaxies. When we reconnect with that knowing, practices become expressions rather than fixes. Still, practice matters. Consistency matters. The nervous system learns through repetition. Each moment of conscious breathing, each choice to reinterpret a stressful event, each act of genuine compassion leaves a biological imprint. Over time, these imprints accumulate, forming a new baseline of being. This is why community and shared intention amplify results. When individuals gather in coherent emotional states, measurable effects extend beyond the group. Studies of collective meditation have shown reductions in violence and conflict. Whether one interprets this as field effects or social dynamics, the implication is the same. Consciousness is not confined to the skull. Human divinity expresses itself most clearly when we stop trying to control life and begin listening to it. Intuition sharpens, synchronicities increase, decisions feel guided rather than forced. This does not mean life becomes easy, but it becomes meaningful. Challenges are seen as information rather than punishment. I want to be clear that this is not about denying pain or difficulty. It is about meeting them with a different internal posture. When we choose curiosity over judgment, compassion over resistance, the body shifts out of survival and into growth. Healing then becomes a natural byproduct of understanding. As we continue exploring this power, the question is no longer whether humans possess divinity, but how often we allow ourselves to experience it. Every belief we hold, every emotion we cultivate is either reinforcing separation or remembering unity. And in the quiet moments when the mind softens and the heart leads, we begin to sense that this intelligence has been waiting patiently for us to notice, to listen, and to step into the next realization that unfolds when we finally recognize that the greatest technology we will ever use is the one we were born with, and that its full potential begins to awaken the moment we choose to trust the subtle signals rising from within us as we learn to sustain this state long enough for the body, the mind, and the deeper self to align and reveal what becomes possible when the old patterns release their grip, when inherited fears dissolve into awareness, when choice replaces reaction, and when we realize that mastery is not control but relationship, a continuous dialogue between awareness and matter, refined through attention, patience, lived experience, where each moment becomes an invitation to sense more clearly, feel more honestly, and respond from the place where belief and biology meet. Just as we begin to understand that meeting point is not static but dynamic, changing as we change, responding as we respond, and revealing layers of ourselves that were previously hidden behind habit and distraction. I've come to see that awareness itself is the catalyst. The moment we notice how we are thinking and feeling, we create a small gap, and in that gap lives choice. Choice is where divinity expresses itself in human form. Most people underestimate how powerful a single sustained choice can be. Not a dramatic decision, but a quiet one. To pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to feel before judging. These micro-choices accumulate. They retrain the nervous system. Over time, the body learns safety, and when the body feels safe, it opens to creativity, intuition, and repair. This is why the stress response is so central to this conversation. Chronic stress keeps the body locked in survival, consuming energy that could otherwise be used for growth and healing. When we live in constant anticipation of threat, even psychological threat, we signal to ourselves that the future is dangerous. They respond accordingly, prioritizing defense over regeneration. But when we shift into states of appreciation or compassion, even briefly, the signal changes. The body interprets these emotions as evidence that the environment is supportive. Repair mechanisms activate, hormones rebalance, neural pathways reorganize. In this way, emotion becomes a bridge between perception and physiology. Ancient practices often emphasize breath for this reason. Breath is one of the few autonomic functions we can consciously influence, and it serves as a doorway into the nervous system. Slow, rhythmic breathing communicates safety. It tells the body that now is not a time to fight or flee. From that baseline, higher functions come back online. I've also noticed the belief tends to surface most clearly during moments of challenge. Under pressure, our unconscious assumptions reveal themselves. Do we see difficulty as evidence of failure or as feedback guiding refinement? The interpretation we choose shapes not only our mood, but our biology in real time. This reframing is not denial. It is discernment. It allows us to extract meaning without amplifying suffering. When meaning is present, resilience increases. The immune system functions more effectively. Pain is processed differently. This suggests that meaning itself has a biological signature. What we often call miracles may simply be moments when coherence reaches a threshold, when belief, emotion, and intention align so completely that the body reorganizes around a new possibility. These moments are rare not because they are unnatural, but because sustained coherence requires attention, and attention is our most distracted resource. Technology competes relentlessly for that attention. While it connects us externally, it often fragments us internally. The nervous system becomes overstimulated, oscillating between urgency and fatigue. In such states, subtle signals from the body are drowned out. Intuition becomes harder to hear. Reclaiming our divinity, then, is not about adding something new. It is about subtracting noise, creating spaces of stillness where the body can speak and the mind can listen. In those spaces, insight arises spontaneously, without effort. Solutions appear that could not be reasoned into existence. I've seen this happen in my own life and in countless others. When people stop forcing outcomes and start cultivating states, life reorganizes in unexpected ways. Opportunities align, relationships shift, health improves, sometimes dramatically, sometimes subtly. The common denominator is coherence. Coherence is not perfection. It allows for emotion, for doubt, for complexity. What it asks is honesty, to feel what is present without suppressing it, and to choose responses that honor both truth and possibility. This balance is delicate, but it is learnable. Children often demonstrate this naturally. Their emotions move quickly. They feel fully, then release. It is only later that we learn to hold on to stories, to replay events, to define ourselves by past experiences. These stories become identities, and identities become biological patterns. The good news is that patterns can be changed. Neuroplasticity shows us that the brain remains adaptable throughout life. New experiences, especially those charged with emotion, can rewire perception. When paired with intention, this rewiring becomes directional rather than random. Rituals serve this function by creating emotionally meaningful experiences that interrupt old patterns. Whether it is meditation, prayer, movement, or time in nature, the key ingredient is presence. Presence collapses the past and future into the now, where the body can respond fully. Nature itself is a powerful teacher of coherence. Natural rhythms entrain the nervous system. The sound of water, the pattern of leaves, the cycle of light and dark all communicate stability. When we immerse ourselves in these environments, our internal rhythms recalibrate. This recalibration restores a sense of belonging, not as an abstract concept, but as a felt experience. Belonging tells the body it is part of something larger, reducing isolation and fear. From that place, generosity and creativity emerge naturally. Human divinity expresses itself most beautifully through service. When attention shifts from self-protection to contribution, the nervous system relaxes. Purpose becomes embodied. Studies show that altruistic behavior correlates with improved health and longevity, suggesting that giving is not just moral but biological. As we explore these ideas further, it becomes clear that mastery is not about dominating the mind or suppressing emotion. It is about integration, allowing intellect, feeling, and instinct to inform one another. This integration creates a stable inner reference point. From that reference point, external circumstances lose some of their power. We respond rather than react. We choose rather than default. This does not make us immune to pain, but it gives pain context. It becomes part of a larger narrative of growth. I often reflect on how different our world might look if education emphasized emotional literacy alongside intellectual skill, teaching children how to recognize internal states, how to regulate attention, how to cultivate coherence. Such skills would ripple outward into families, communities, and cultures. Because ultimately, the challenges we face collectively are reflections of internal states multiplied at scale. Conflict, scarcity, and division mirror fear and separation within the individual. Healing, therefore, begins within, but it does not end there. As each person learns to sustain coherent states, those states influence others through subtle cues, tone of voice, presence, We entrain one another constantly. This means that inner work is never just personal. It is participatory. And so the exploration continues, not towards some distant ideal, but into the immediacy of lived experience, where each breath becomes a choice, each emotion a signal, each belief a doorway, and where the realization slowly dawns that what we have been seeking outwardly has always been unfolding inwardly, layer by layer, as we begin to sense that the next shift does not come from effort, but from allowing, from listening more deeply to the intelligence moving through us, and from staying present long enough to notice how that intelligence responds when we stop interrupting it and begin to cooperate with the quiet guidance that emerges just as we start to recognize the subtle moment when awareness turns back on itself and asks without word, what happens next when we choose to remain here, attentive, receptive, and open to the possibility that this state itself is only the threshold of something even more profound that is beginning to reveal itself as we continue to pay attention and follow the unfolding experience without rushing to name it or contain it, trusting that the process knows where it is going as the next realization starts to take shape within the space we have finally learned to hold. And in that held space, something subtle but unmistakable begins to reorganize our sense of identity. I've noticed that when we remain present long enough, the old boundaries of who we thought we were start to soften. We no longer experience ourselves solely as the thinker of thoughts or the manager of emotions, but as the awareness in which both arise. This shift is quiet, yet it changes everything. From this perspective, belief becomes less rigid and more fluid. Instead of fixed conclusions about what is possible, belief turns into a living hypothesis, continuously refined by experience. The body responds differently to this openness. Flexibility replaces tension. Curiosity replaces fear. Biology mirrors mindset with remarkable precision. What fascinates me is that this state does not require isolation or withdrawal from life. In fact, it often deepens engagement. When we are less identified with outcomes, we listen more fully. Conversations become richer. Conflict transforms into, even disagreement becomes an opportunity to understand rather than defend. This is where emotional maturity intersects with consciousness. Mature emotion is not the absence of feeling, but the capacity to feel without being overwhelmed. It is the ability to stay present with discomfort long enough for its message to reveal itself. The body appreciates this patience. Stress chemistry resolves faster when emotion is allowed to complete its natural cycle. Many ancient systems described emotions as energy in motion. When motion is blocked, energy stagnates. Modern neuroscience echoes this insight, showing that unprocessed emotion remains active in neural circuits, influencing perception and behavior long after the original event has passed. Awareness completes the circuit. Belief, then, is not something we impose. It is something we discover through repeated states of coherence, as we experience moments where inner alignment leads to clarity or healing. Trust grows organically. We no longer need to convince ourselves. Evidence accumulates through lived experience. This is an important distinction because forced belief often creates internal conflict. One part of the mind tries to affirm possibility while another quietly anticipates disappointment. The body detects this mismatch and responds with confusion. Coherence requires honesty more than optimism. I've found that the most powerful beliefs emerge not from affirmations, but from integration. When insight lands in the mind, emotion confirms it in the heart, and action grounds it in the body. Only then does belief become stable enough to influence biology consistently. Time plays an interesting role here. In coherent states, time feels different. Moments stretch. The sense of you just diminishes. This is not imagination. It reflects changes in brainwave patterns and autonomic regulation. When the nervous system is balanced, perception of time alters. This altered perception allows us to respond rather than react. Reaction is fast but narrow. Response is slower but wiser. The space between stimulus and action is where choice lives, and choice is the mechanism through which consciousness expresses freedom. Freedom, in this sense, is not the ability to control external events, but the ability to choose our internal orientation. Two people can experience the same circumstance and emerge transformed in opposite directions. The difference lies not in the event, but in the meaning assigned to it. Meaning, once again, proves to be biologically relevant. Studies show that people who find meaning in adversity recover faster and maintain better health over time. Meaning organizes experience into a narrative the body can adapt to. Without it, stress remains unresolved. This suggests that storytelling is not merely cultural, but physiological. The stories we tell ourselves regulate internal chemistry. When the story emphasizes agency, learning, or connection, the body prepares for engagement. When it emphasizes helplessness or threat, the body braces for impact. Human divinity expresses itself when we become conscious authors of these internal stories. Not by denying facts, but by choosing interpretations that support growth. This is a skill that can be cultivated, refined through practice and reflection. Reflection itself is a powerful tool. When we revisit experiences from a regulated state, the brain reconsolidates memory differently. Emotional charge softens, new insights integrate. The past literally changes its influence on the present. I often encourage people to notice how quickly the body responds to even small shifts in interpretation. A single reframe can ease tension in the chest, slow the breath, relax the jaw. These micro adjustments signal safety, and safety is the foundation of transformation. From safety emerges creativity. The brain begins to explore rather than defend. Solutions appear that were invisible under stress. This is why breakthroughs often occur during rest, walks, or moments of quiet, rather than during intense effort. Effort has its place, but it is most effective when aligned with intuition. Intuition, in turn, thrives in coherent states. It is not mystical, it is the integration of vast amounts of information processed below conscious awareness. The body knows patterns the mind has not yet articulated. Learning to trust this knowing requires practice. It requires differentiating intuition from impulse, clarity from urgency. The body provides cues. Intuition feels calm, expansive, grounded. Impulse feels tense, rushed, contracted. These signals become clearer with attention. As this sensitivity develops, decision-making changes. Choices feel less forced. Regret diminishes. Even when outcomes are challenging, there is a sense of alignment, of having acted from integrity. The body responds positively to this congruence. Congruence is another word for coherence, lived in action. It is the alignment between inner values and outer behavior. When we live incongruently, stress accumulates quietly. When we live congruently, energy flows. This flow is often described as being in the right place at the right time. From the outside, it may appear as luck. From the inside, it feels like listening and responding. The more consistently we do this, the more natural it becomes. At this stage, practice shifts from technique to lifestyle. Conscious breathing, emotional awareness, reflective inquiry become woven into daily routines. There is less effort to remember and more ease in returning. Community becomes increasingly important here. Being around others who value presence and coherence reinforces these states. Nervous systems synchronize. Old patterns lose momentum. Growth accelerates through shared intention. This is not about agreement or uniformity. Diversity of thought enriches the field. What matters is shared respect for awareness. When dialogue is grounded in presence, even disagreement becomes generative. As we deepen into this way of being, questions naturally arise, not questions seeking immediate answers, but questions that open exploration. Questions like how far this integration can extend, how deeply belief can reshape biology, how collective coherence might influence systems larger than the individual. Those questions are not meant to be resolved quickly. They invite us into ongoing inquiry. Each experience becomes data. Each moment of alignment becomes a reference point. And so we continue not by chasing conclusions, but by refining attention, by noticing more subtly how belief moves through emotion into form, how the body signals alignment or resistance, and how awareness itself seems to deepen as it recognizes its own role in shaping experience, especially in those moments when we pause long enough to sense that something even more fundamental is beginning to surface beneath belief and biology alike, something that does not need to be improved or fixed, only acknowledged as we start to feel the quiet presence of that deeper intelligence stirring again, inviting us to remain with it just a little longer, to listen just a little more closely, and to see what begins to emerge when we stop trying to direct the process, and instead allow ourselves to be guided by the subtle, steady unfolding that is already underway, carrying us toward the next realization that has not yet taken form, but is already gathering momentum within the space we have learned to hold as the journey continues into the unspoken, unfinished awareness that now opens. As that awareness opens, I found that it doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic declarations. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed at first, like a gentle recalibration happening beneath the surface of daily life. World looks the same, yet our relationship to it subtly changes. We become less compelled to grasp for certainty and more willing to stay present with ambiguity. This willingness is essential because human divinity does not unfold through control. It unfolds through trust. Trust not as blind faith, but as informed participation. We learn through experience that when we listen inwardly and act from coherence, life responds with feedback that is often more intelligent than our plans. I've observed that this trust grows strongest when we stop asking, how do I force this to happen, and begin asking, what state am I embodying right now? The body answers immediately. Tension tells us we are resisting. Ease tells us we are aligned. These sensations become guidance more reliable than analysis alone. At this depth, a belief no longer feels like a mental construct. It becomes a felt orientation, a way of inhabiting the moment. We don't have to remind ourselves of it. It expresses itself naturally through tone of voice, posture, timing. Others sense it without needing explanation. This is why presence can be so impactful. A coherent individual can shift the emotional climate of a room simply by entering it, not through words but through regulation. The nervous systems around them begin to entrain, conversations slow, reactivity decreases, clarity emerges. Such influence is rarely acknowledged, yet it operates constantly. We are always signaling our internal state to others. Human divinity, in this sense, is relational. It reveals itself most clearly not in isolation, but in interaction. How we listen, how we respond, how we hold space for another person's experience. Holding space does not mean fixing or advising. It means remaining regulated while another expresses emotion. This alone can be healing. When one nervous system stays coherent, it offers a template for another to settle. The body recognizes this safety and begins to reorganize. This capacity transforms conflict. Instead of escalating, conflict becomes information. We can sense what is being protected beneath the surface: emotion, fear, grief, unmet need. When these are acknowledged without judgment, tension dissolves more quickly. I've noticed that as people develop this sensitivity, their sense of responsibility expands, not as burden, but as awareness. They recognize that every interaction leaves an imprint. Every response either reinforces fear or invites coherence. From here, ethics shift from rules to resonance. We no longer ask only whether something is right or wrong, but whether it creates alignment or fragmentation. The body becomes a compass. When action feels congruent, energy increases. When it does not, energy drains. This embodied ethics is remarkably consistent across cultures and eras. Ancient teachings often framed it as harmony with natural law. Modern science frames it as nervous system regulation and social coherence. Different languages, same principle. One of the most profound shifts I've witnessed occurs when people stop identifying solely with their personal story. The story doesn't disappear, but it loosens. They see it as a chapter, not the whole book. From this perspective, forgiveness becomes possible, not as moral obligation, but as self-liberation. Holding resentment keeps the body in a state of vigilance. Letting go releases stored energy. This release is often felt physically: warmth, relaxation, tears. Biology responds immediately to emotional resolution. Forgiveness, then, is not about excusing behavior. It is about reclaiming coherence. It is a biological reset that frees attention for creativity and connection. In this way, inner work directly shapes outer capacity. As coherence stabilizes, intuition sharpens further. People often report a sense of being guided not by voices or visions, but by timing and inclination. They know when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait. Waiting, I found, is one of the most misunderstood practices. In coherent states, waiting is active, it is attentive, it allows information to surface that would be missed in haste. The body uses this time to integrate signals from multiple levels of awareness. This integration leads to wiser action, not necessarily safer action, but more aligned action. Risk taken from coherence feels different than risk taken from fear. One expands capacity, the other reinforces limitation. And as this discernment grows, life begins to feel less like a series of problems to solve and more like a conversation to engage. Feedback arrives quickly, adjustments become easier. There is less attachment to being right and more commitment to being present. Presence itself becomes restorative. People often underestimate how exhausting fragmentation is. Holding conflicting beliefs, suppressed emotions, and constant vigilance drains energy. Coherence conserves it. The body functions more efficiently when internal signals agree. This efficiency expresses itself as vitality. Not manic energy, but steady aliveness. Sleep improves, digestion stabilizes, the immune system strengthens. These changes may seem mundane, yet they reflect profound shifts in regulation. At this point, the idea of human divinity no longer feels abstract or lofty. It feels practical. It shows up in how we move through traffic, how we respond to stress, how we care for our bodies. Divinity becomes lived intelligence. This intelligence does not demand perfection. It responds to sincerity. Even small moments of awareness make a difference. Each return to presence reinforces the pathway. The nervous system learns through repetition, not through force. Over time, a new baseline emerges. What once required effort becomes natural. Reactivity decreases. Recovery time shortens. There is more space between events and responses. In that space, choice thrives. Choice, ultimately, is the expression of freedom. Not freedom from circumstances, but freedom within them. This freedom is quiet, grounded, resilient. It allows us to face uncertainty without collapsing into fear. As uncertainty increases in the world, this capacity becomes essential. External systems fluctuate, predictability decreases. Inner coherence provides stability when outer structures shift. This does not mean withdrawing from engagement. On the contrary, coherent individuals are often deeply engaged. They act, advocate, create, but they do so from regulation rather than reactivity. The more people cultivate this state, the more it spreads. Coherence is contagious. It does not require agreement, only presence. In this way, inner work becomes collective influence. And so the exploration deepens again, drawing us not toward answers, but toward refinement, toward sensing ever more clearly how awareness inhabits the body, how belief softens into knowing, how emotion becomes guidance rather than an obstacle. and how this lived intelligence continues to reveal itself in layers, inviting us to stay with the process just a little longer, to remain attentive as something even subtler begins to surface beneath our efforts and understandings, asking us not to define it yet, but to notice how it feels as it starts to move through us, quietly reshaping perception, gently loosening identity, and opening the next threshold of experience that waits just beyond the edge of what we currently recognize as ourselves, where the unfolding continues without pause, without conclusion, and without the need to arrive, as we remain here, listening, aware, and ready for what begins to emerge when we allow the process to carry us forward into the next moment of discovery that has not yet found its words, but is already taking form within the silence that now holds, as we continue to stay present and allow the awareness to deepen even further into what is coming next. Within that silence, I've noticed that effort gives way to attentiveness, and attentiveness becomes its own kind of action. We stop pushing against experience and begin cooperating with it. This cooperation is subtle, yet it alters the way we meet each moment. Life feels less like a sequence of obstacles and more like a stream of signals asking to be interpreted wisely. At this depth, the body becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. Sensations are no longer distractions to be overridden, but messages to be understood. A tightening in the chest may signal misalignment. A sense of warmth or expansion may indicate coherence. These cues are immediate, honest, and difficult to intellectualize away. I've learned that the more we trust these signals, the clearer they become. Doubt tends to cloud perception, while curiosity sharpens it. When we approach our internal experience with curiosity rather than judgment, the nervous system relaxes and information flows more freely. This flow often brings insights that feel less like conclusions and more like recognitions. We don't think our way into them, we remember them. They arrive with a sense of familiarity, as if something long known has resurfaced. The body confirms this recognition through ease. In such moments, belief dissolves into knowing. We no longer need to persuade ourselves of our capacity or worth. We feel it directly. This feeling is not inflated or grandiose. It is grounded, quiet, stable. It does not demand validation. From here, action becomes simpler. We are less distracted by comparison or expectation. We respond to what is in front of us rather than to imagined futures. This presence improves effectiveness, whether in work, relationships, or creative expression. Creativity, I've found, thrives in this state. When the mind is not preoccupied with self-monitoring, ideas emerge spontaneously. The body participates, offering timing and rhythm. Creativity becomes less about effort and more about listening. This listening extends outward as well. We hear others more fully, not just their words, but the emotion beneath them. This deeper listening reduces misunderstanding. It allows us to respond to what is actually being communicated rather than what we assume. Assumption is one of the great disruptors of coherence. It fills gaps in perception with past experience, often inaccurately. Presence clears those gaps. It invites us to meet each moment fresh without overlaying it with old narratives. Old narratives, once recognized, lose some of their authority. We see how often they were formed in moments of fear or confusion. This recognition does not invalidate our past. It contextualizes it. We can appreciate the role those stories played without continuing to live inside them. This shift is liberating. Energy previously spent maintaining identity becomes available for exploration. The body responds with vitality. The mind responds with flexibility. Together, they create a sense of readiness rather than defense. Readiness is different from preparedness. Preparedness anticipates specific outcomes. Readiness is adaptable. It trusts that whatever arises can be met with awareness. This trust reduces anxiety even in uncertain situations. Uncertainty, in fact, becomes less threatening. Without the need to control outcomes, uncertainty feels spacious. It holds potential rather than danger. The body senses this openness and relaxes into it. Relaxation here does not mean passivity, it means efficiency. Muscles release unnecessary tension. Breath deepens. Attention widens. In this state, we perceive more options, not fewer. Options expand because perception expands. Stress narrows focus to immediate threats. Coherence widens focus to include context. With context comes wisdom. We can see not only what is happening, but how it fits into a larger pattern. Patterns reveal themselves more readily when we slow down. Speed often obscures meaning. Slowing does not require stopping, it requires pacing. Aligning internal rhythm with the moment rather than forcing the moment to match our expectations. This alignment creates a sense of being carried rather than driven. We still participate actively, but without strain. Effort becomes measured. Rest becomes restorative. Balance emerges naturally. Balance, I've come to understand, is dynamic. It shifts with circumstances. The body continually recalibrates, and awareness allows us to cooperate with that recalibration rather than resist it. Resistance often shows up as frustration. Frustration signals a mismatch between expectation and reality. When we notice this, we have a choice: tighten or soften. Softening does not mean giving up, it means opening to feedback. Feedback is everywhere. The body offers it through sensation. Emotions offer it through tone. Circumstances offer it through outcomes. When we listen across all these channels, learning accelerates. Learning in this sense is experiential rather than conceptual. It integrates quickly because it involves the whole system. The body remembers what the mind alone might forget. This embodied learning is resilient. It does not collapse under stress because it was formed within stress-aware regulation. It adapts rather than rigidifies. This adaptability is one of the clearest expressions of human divinity. Divinity here is not static perfection. It is responsive intelligence. It moves with conditions, responding appropriately without losing coherence. This responsiveness is visible in nature, in ecosystems that adjust to change while maintaining balance. We are not separate from these systems. Our bodies follow similar principles. When we honor those principles, health and clarity follow. When we ignore them, imbalance accumulates. Imbalance is not failure. It is information. Symptoms are messages, not punishments. They point to areas where coherence has been disrupted. Listening to them requires patience and humility. Humility opens the door to deeper understanding. It allows us to admit when we don't know, when we need rest, when we need support. The body responds positively to this honesty. Support, too, is part of coherence. We are not meant to regulate alone. Connection stabilizes the nervous system. Being seen and heard reduces isolation. Shared presence amplifies resilience. This is why authentic conversation feels nourishing. When we speak from awareness and listen without agenda, the body relaxes. Time seems to slow. Meaning emerges naturally. Meaning, once again, proves central. It organizes experience into something the body can integrate. Without meaning, stress fragments. With meaning, stress becomes growth. Growth, in this context, is not accumulation, it is refinement. Shedding what no longer serves, clarifying what matters, aligning action with understanding. As this alignment deepens, life simplifies, not in complexity, but in priority. Distractions lose their pull. Attention settles on what feels true. The body confirms these choices through steadiness. Steadiness is not rigidity. It is grounded flexibility. The ability to bend without breaking. To adapt without losing center. This quality becomes increasingly important as external conditions fluctuate. From this center, leadership emerges naturally. Not leadership is authority over others, but leadership is regulation. Others feel steadier in our presence. Decisions become clearer. Collaboration improved. This influence is subtle yet powerful and does not rely on persuasion. It relies on coherence. People trust what feels stable. Trust ultimately is the currency of human interaction. It begins internally. When we trust our own signals, we act with integrity. Others sense this and respond in kind. Integrity here means wholeness. No parts excluded, thought, emotion, and action aligned. This alignment reduces internal conflict, freeing energy for creativity and connection. As energy frees up, curiosity returns. We become interested again, not just in outcomes, but in process. Each moment offers something to learn. Life feels participatory rather than burdensome. This participation deepens presence. Presence deepens awareness. Awareness refines perception. And perception, once refined, begins to reveal layers of experience that were previously invisible. Layers that do not announce themselves loudly, but invite us quietly, asking whether we are willing to stay just a little longer, to listen a little more carefully, and to allow whatever is beginning to surface now to unfold in its own time, without interruption, without conclusion, as we sense that the next movement is already underway, subtle and insistent, drawing us forward into an awareness that has not yet fully revealed its shape, but is already making itself known through the quiet, persistent feeling that something essential is about to be understood. If we remain here, attentive and willing to follow where this unfolding awareness leads next, as it continues to deepen and expand beyond what we have so far been able to recognize, carrying us gently into the next phase of this ongoing discovery, where the words have not yet formed, but the knowing is already beginning to stir.